Hi everyone in English 2323, it's Dr. E and I'm here with your week 7 instructional video. We're officially into October, which means this is we're just going to go up from here in terms of having the spooky aesthetic. So this week's costume, a little Rosie the Riveter. Anyhow, hope y'all are doing well. I'm just going to go to D2L and show us where to go and what to do for this week. So let's just get to it. All right, so we're in the week 7 module, and from our schedule, you can see that we're reading the biography of Robert Louis Stevenson, written by our text editors, as well as The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, this is a longer text, so we had Arthur Conan Doyle with The Speckled Band, short story, pretty approachable when it comes to language and writing. We're getting into something that's a bit lengthier, and we have some more kind of formalized writing when it comes to Stevenson. He also is very descriptive, so there's lots of that, which is helpful. A lot of readers are going to prefer that kind of writing, so think about that as you read. You know, what writing do you prefer? What approach? But don't read it all in one sitting, right? Take some breaks. Make sure that you are working things out before moving into the next chapter, the next, part of the story. But it's really great to read Stevenson right behind Doyle because, it's the same time period. There are overlapping themes and, it's October, so Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, why not? All right, so getting back to our weekly module. So we have the instructional video, also a reading journal video, which you may have seen already. It's not a bad thing to go back and take a look. You do have a reading journal that's going to be due this week, as well as a discussion and participation quiz. So this looks very similar to other weeks, perhaps. We are moving into another reading journal. From what I'm seeing in the current or the most recent journals, everybody's doing well. I mean, I feel as though the only thing I've had to really comment on in terms of maybe adjusting the grade down a little bit is those pesky grammar things. It's the writing. So remember that your overall goal when writing anything for college is to communicate your ideas effectively. I mean, that's any writing, right? You want to communicate your ideas effectively, and you can't necessarily do that if there are spelling, grammar, all those kinds of things. I am not going to nitpick and take 0.5 points off for this kind of grammar infraction or, 1 point here. That's just nitpicking, and I don't see that as my job. I don't see it as your job as writers to have so much fear about that kind of thing. If you are communicating your ideas effectively, that's all I'm really looking for, right? So think about that as we move into our next reading journal. And you should have feedback that you can look at from the previous reading journal. That should be posted by about noon on Monday. I'm going to try to get that posted then. All right, so you have a discussion post due Thursday. You have the reading journal. Remember that you are required to respond to 2 colleagues in the discussion, and then the participation quiz, which is, everything related to this video, the reading, etc. So if you scroll down, we have the reading journal instructional video. I also reposted the schedule. I want to note that originally for this week, I think I made a change. I honestly can't remember at this point, but I've reposted it. So if anything, I would take things away. I wouldn't just add major assignments. So don't worry about that kind of thing. All right, so if we go to the week 7 discussion, this week we're going to try something that I hope is kind of fun. It's enjoyable to think about this in terms of images and what we think of in our minds. So after reading the text, I want you to find an image, can be your own, one you found from the internet, that depicts a particular scene in this section of the story. Now, I want to emphasize, yes, you can start with Googling Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and then looking at the image results. But I really want you to, before you do anything, read the text, let the imagery kind of marinate for a little bit, and then find something that specifically relates to your vision. Based on Stevenson's writing, what is your vision of a scene, a character, something like that, right? It's just a different approach, right? We also need to do some writing, right? So after choosing the image and posting it in the text box, right, you should be able to copy and paste. So just read the directions. Write a paragraph that explains your choice. So it's going to require utilizing those direct quotes. So avoid just copying and pasting a whole sentence or two. That doesn't help your readers. So when it comes to explaining your choice, we need more than you to just drop quotes, because what you see in terms of the language Stevenson chooses, what you see in your own mind, is not the same as what the person who is going to post after you will see. So we need to engage with how Stevenson has created that image in your mind, and he does that through his writing, right? So I've given you an example, and I've given you an example of what to avoid, right? It's too general. It's not, there isn't enough. So here is the avoid. I chose this image because Stevenson wrote that the character was a man of rugged countenance, da 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 da. Here's the end of quote. This picture is what I thought of when I read those words. The man in the image is tall and thin. Okay, so there's just this long quote, and then I said, this is what I thought of. So that's not enough. You need to give us the why. Push your ideas for a bit more. Here's an example of how to be more specific. For some reason, this image is similar to how I created the character in my mind, because the way Stevenson describes him as lean, long, yet somehow lovable. So I've picked specifics, right, from the overall quote. I actually imagined the character from a cartoon of my youth, Ichabod Crane. Though Crane isn't necessarily drawn as having a rugged countenance, he's a bit goofy and embarrassed in discourse, right? So the image doesn't have to perfectly match, right? My chosen image is not necessarily what matches the quote that I've chosen, but there's enough there that it made me think of this character, right? Or there's enough in the scene that you've chosen, if you find an image that will allow those connections, right? Okay, so giving you an example, that's your discussion this week, which I hope is kind of fun, like looking for something that reflects how you read. All right. The next thing is Journal 2, and this should be pretty self-explanatory just because we have the journal guidelines, the template, there's the assignment video. So the journals don't necessarily change unless I give you a specific prompt that I really want you to consider. You can think of connections between this text and Arthur Conan Doyle. You can bring in elements of the time period, right? Because we're reading in the Victorian era. Make those connections. Everybody's journal should be a little bit different because we all read differently, right? So you're going to find different elements, right? Think about if you live during this time period, that kind of thing. All right. So if we go back to week 7, the last thing we have is the quiz. I don't have a specific word for you this week, but you will need to answer my costume. My outfit is Rosie the Riveter, right? This is the Leslie Knope Parks and Recreation version, but close enough, right? So the other thing I want to remind you about is that if you're like me, I sometimes have some issues when it comes to accessing D2L. It doesn't load or that kind of thing. Remember that you'll want to use Chrome as your browser. I don't know why. Other browsers just don't work as well with D2L. You also want to make sure that you're deleting your browsing data. So if you don't know how to do it, just Google it, because I find that almost every time I come back to do work, I have to delete my browsing data, or it just, it just times out trying to access a particular page. So make sure that that's something that you're considering, okay? Rosie the Riveter, delete browsing data. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you all have a great week.